Professional hosts don't wait until the retreat is over to see if it's profitable. They forecast the numbers before they book anything, and in this video, I'm going to show you how. If you've ever signed a contract, paid a deposit, or opened registration and only realized later that the numbers felt a little shaky, this is the missing step that changes the experience. A lot of retreat planning stops at make a budget. A budget is helpful, but a lot of the times it sticks as one static picture. One expected head count, one expected set of costs, one expected outcome. If you've ever looked at an invoice and thought, I did not see that coming, it doesn't mean that you're bad with numbers. It usually means that the numbers only focus on one version of reality. Forecasting is different. Forecasting assumes that things are going to move. Head counts shift. Vendors adjust. Fees show up. Your workload expands as decisions are being made. Forecasting gives you room for that before you commit. So let's make this simple. Estimating is when you pick a number that seems reasonable and hope that the retreat behaves in the way that you've planned. Forecasting, on the other hand, is when you model a few different likely outcomes and scenarios and you make your decision from. If you've ever created a budget and then never revisited as decisions were being made as the event evolved, then forecasting will feel like an upgrade instead of a complication. Because the goal is not perfection. The goal is to not be surprised by things that could be predicted in advance. There are 3 forecasts I want you to make for every event. Most likely, this is your realistic head count and your realistic cost based on what you know today. Best case, this is what happens if your attendance stays strong and your costs stay stable. And worst case, this is what happens if your head count is lower than you expected or one of the categories in your budget costs increases more than you expected it to. If the word worst case makes you tense, I want to help reframe that. Because this isn't pessimism, it's responsibility. It's you asking before you sign anything, if everything doesn't work out exactly as I hope it will I still be okay? That question protects you and your business. So let me walk you through a simple way to do this without turning it into some massive project. Start with your top 5 categories, so one that makes the biggest impacts on you financially. For many retreats, that's going to look like venue and lodging, food and beverage, travel and transport, materials and print, and help on site or behind the scenes. And now for each category, write down 3 numbers: best case, most likely, and worst case. You're not trying to nail it down to the penny, you're just trying to give yourself some range. And then you're going to do the same for attendance. Instead of one head count, all range that you can live with. For example, what happens if I have 10 guests? What happens if I have 14? What happens if I have 18? Now you have a grid, and that grid becomes your control panel. You can see in advance what version of the retreat works and which ones create strain. If you're planning a retreat this year and want to see how your backend decisions affect your profitability, then check out my free Event Systems ROI audit, which was made for this. It helps you identify where money and time leaks quietly through scattered information, unfinished decisions, inefficient workflows, and preventable last-minute fix. If retreats are part of your business or something that you want to add as something long-term, then you'll want to check this out. You'll find the links for it down below. Up to this point, everything that we've talked about has lived on paper. Cost, attendance, scenario. But there's one variable that quietly shapes all of those. And it's the reason many forecasts fall apart in real time. And that's your time. Your time and the workload that is required to make it happen. When workload isn't included in the forecast, it doesn't just disappear. It shows up later as a cost. Extra hours turn into rushed decisions. Rushed decisions turn into higher fees. Overload turns into last-minute help at a premium, and that's why retreats can look solid on paper and still feel demanding to run. The same is true for timing. When decisions slide to later, prices rise. Options narrow, and flexibility disappears. Those aren't surprises. They're predictable outcomes of time pressure. So a complete forecast doesn't just ask, what will this cost? It also asks, what is required of me? And what happens if I'm carrying more than I planned? If time and workload aren't modeled alongside money, then the forecast is incomplete. This is where everything that we've talked about comes together. Profit isn't something that you wait to see at the end of a retreat. It's something you decide on before you book, before you commit, and before tickets ever go on sale. When you forecast costs, attendance, time, and workload together, you start hoping that the retreat works out and start running the retreat that works best for you. And that is how experienced hosts avoid being blindsided later. Not by predicting everything perfectly, but by planning how the retreat functions under different behaviors. And once you can do that, forecasting stops being about spreadsheets and starts becoming about how you lead. Go ahead and click the video on your screen right now, where we'll look at exactly what keeps those forecasts intact. The backend systems and operational foundations that support the retreat once planning begins. And if retreats are part of your business or you want them to be, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out.